Okay, so right around the time when Pokemon Mystery Dungeons 1 was released, I actually found something very interesting out. I was running through the western cave, the one where Mewtwo is, in Pokemon Red, Red and Blue Rescue Team, which is again the first one, Game Boy Advance and the DS. And it kind of made me realize something. Now, obviously, like at this time, we wouldn't have known this because we never would have saw like some of the prototype data. But there's something like every Pokemon's got like a sleeping animation as far as the Pokemon series goes. Now, and as far as the Mystery Dungeon series goes, I think they recycled like the sprites from like the previous games up until like Super Mystery Dungeons, where it was like all redone and everything. I could be wrong, but I mean, as far as like the sprites that were in Gen 1, or I'm in, sorry, in Mystery Dungeons 1, so the first three generations, all the way up to, Bulbasaur, all the way up to Deoxys, and then when Gen 4 came out, we had all 493 Pokemon except for Arcserus in the original. Um, like, I'm trying to think what aisle it was that you had to go through to see the statue, and it kind of revealed it, sort of like say, hey, here's another Pokemon. Even though people found it even sooner because they hacked Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and stuff like that. It's interesting how they found that out. But anyways, so what was really interesting though was that when Pokemon really did what it did. So like, fast forward to Mystery Dungeons 1. And like, for example, Blastoise has a sleeping animation where it's got like, it has like a bubble in its mouth sort of, or maybe it's its nose. It's sleeping obviously. But it's the way Blastoise sleeps though, it's kind of a nod up. It made me think about the prototype data from Gen 1. And I wonder if there really was a connection cuz I don't know if Squirtle and War Turtle do this off the top of my head in the games, but obviously it's a nod off because the people who designed Gen like the games would know this stuff. And even though Mystery Dungeons was kind of developed by another company that was always big Pokemon fans, but they worked with some of the people that actually, made Pokemon, if I remember correctly. So I wouldn't be surprised that, they took data that they knew that maybe we didn't know about. So, like, for example, Blastoise was originally designed, and I think it was done by Ken Sugimori, the original Ken Sugimori, the one that's been there since, been there with Satoshi Tajiri from day one, if I remember correctly. He, like, when he designed a lot of the stuff that he did for the Pokemon illustrations, I think he was also responsible for a lot of the Pokemon prototype Pokemon that were eventually redesigned later on. Or maybe it was Satoshi Tajiri that also took the credit for coming up with a lot of these ideas too. But either way, it was somebody on the development team that had already, they had this at one point, this idea. But Blastoise was originally in its own family. It was never related to Squirtle. So what I found out was interesting. Is it possible that the prototype data could have actually been referenced in Mystery Dungeons, even though they didn't show it directly? It's interesting to think. So like Blastoise having like the bubble in its mouth or nose, depending on where it's at, it could have been a nod off to the Pokemon it previously. This is the one that wasn't related to Squirtle. It was actually called Blastyke. Maybe it could have been named something different, but this is what I remember it as. So if this Pokemon actually always had like a bubble in its mouth, no matter how hard it tried to get rid of it, because it was a water type, obviously, and it was like a baby turtle, basically. And it looked more like Blastoise than Squirtle does. Um, it's interesting to think that maybe that's where they originally got the nod off. So the original pre-evolved version of Blastoise wasn't in the game, but maybe its characteristics were, sort of. So it was supposed to be like a nod off that like Squirtle would evolve into War Turtle would evolve into Blastoise, and obviously Blastoise kind of created its own mess too because, it originally replaced another Pokemon like Omega, and then, believe it or not, Squirtle actually would evolve into a completely different Pokemon. Like War Turtle would evolve into a completely different Pokemon. So there was like 3 different Pokemon that ended up getting scrapped due to cartridge limitations. You had the original Omega, which was a Mecha Godzilla, which was recycled for Blastoise, shared the same battle cry, and if you really compare the two designs, they look very identical to each other, even though Omega was an electric type, and then later on they moved Blastoise to Squirtle's family because it was like the closest thing to a turtle. So that's why War Turtle looks completely different than Blastoise does, because it didn't originally evolve into it. And then because Blastoise was moved from a different family, they scrapped the Blastyke evolution, and then Blastyke was never seen again until it was leaked. Its back sprite was leaked, but its front sprite was redone very carefully. And so we got an idea that perhaps Blastyke was originally supposed to be it was not only related to Blastoise, but it was also related to, they could have been taking prototype data and referencing it in the official Pokemon games, because the people who originally designed those games would have, they had so many ideas that they didn't use, but as a developer, there's so many ideas that they're looking forward to, or they're taking them from a book that they might have had from previous games, because I think Mystery Dungeons 1 came out in 2005, if I remember correctly. I believe I was in 7th grade at that time, which was right around about 15, 16 years ago almost. And I still remember it too. But it's nuts to think how time goes by so fast. It's crazy to think that, Pokemon has always had these ideas where I wouldn't be surprised that there's still a lot of stuff we obviously haven't found yet, whether it's because of prototype data or ideas they changed. But it's just crazy to think like how Pokemon has gotten where it's at. And once again, there's just so many ideas that they must have gone through, and so many ideas that most people don't even know about that have pertained to the series for so long. And this is just something to think about. To think maybe Blastoise not only is sort of related to Squirtle and War Turtle now somehow, because again, Pokemon evolutions, we've seen Pokemon evolve, and I'm sure you could, if anybody looks really hard enough, you could probably find Pokemon that don't even literally look like what they resemble, when they evolve later on. Who's to say that other Pokemon families might not have been moved around a little bit either? It's interesting to think about. So you guys will have to figure that one out as time goes on, but I guess they said it, I think Lotad, or what was it, Lotad or somebody else said it best in Mystery Dungeons 1, like when a Pokemon evolves originally, their entire appearance looks different. Their nature becomes a lot different, but they're still the same, like they could still be the same Pokemon though, deep down, So, and it's interesting to think though, it's kind of like a metaphor for life, no matter how much time changes, you could still see like certain things never change, or kind of like an Ocarina of Time, kind of like what Sheik used to say, time is like, the flow of time is cruel, but at the same time though, some things never have to change, even though people change and life changes, but not everything has to change, some things can still be the same, and it can very well be what we want it to be. So it's just interesting to think like how many ideas we can think of that we don't know yet, but have been right in front of us this whole time. We just need like an idea about it though. And it kind of gets me thinking that maybe Pokemon's no different as far as, some of the stuff that I keep pointing out every now and again. There's a lot of reasons to believe that Pokemon was different over time, but it's actually really interesting that even the game designers even go back and reference certain things that they might have had. I'll give you another example, something to think about. Think of the Substitute doll. As a matter of fact, that was actually supposed to be a beta Pokemon, but it was a Pokemon called the Celia. It was basically a beta Larvitar, if our observations are correct, in Generation 1. However, though, they ended up scrapping this Pokemon, but they ended up keeping the sprite design for the original Substitute doll. A lot of people are starting to realize this now. So, Substitute was a Pokemon move that was there from the very beginning. Beta Larvitar was also there from the very beginning, too. Even though Larvitar wasn't until Gen 2, but that explains why he came back in Gen 2. Because they probably wanted to keep that Pokemon. And then it evolved into Tyranitar, but we also had it originally evolved from a Pokemon called Roardon. Anyways, if that is true, and that's also where Venusaur's Cry came from, believe it or not, but they recycled it. So I wouldn't be surprised they took a bunch of stuff and kind of moved some stuff around, but they took the ideas that they had and they voted on the ones they wanted to. Again, cartridge limitations, but they also reworked the ideas that they didn't use and the ones later on when they had more time, and they also came up with a bunch of stuff before they started reworking some more ideas, and then that stuff got scrapped and the next games came out, and what did they do as time went on? I wouldn't be surprised that's kind of the magic of Pokemon and what Satoshi Tajiri stated. And I mean, and it's kind of like the way Asians are brought up in business, like time is money, but at the same time, it's a matter of principle. They've always stated that they believe that their work shouldn't be wasted. It should be reused into something else. So I know Capcom did the same thing when they made Resident Evil 4. They wrote like 3 scripts to the game, and they ended up scrapping all 3 of those scripts and rewriting them into side games for the Resident Evil series. One of them became Dante's Inferno. The other one came, there was a game, it was called Hunting Grounds, or it's a clock tower game, basically. If you've never played it, and it's a hard one too. It's but Capcom always made hard games here and there. It was also called Demento, I believe, in Japanese. And then there was one for I'm trying to remember what the other game was, but it was another game that Capcom made that I haven't got a chance to play yet. But it was interesting though. They recycled the scripts from previous Resident Evil games, or maybe they recycled it for like a Fatal Frame game. I don't know, Project Zero, which is basically the same guy who made Resident Evil made made a lot of other horror games too. Basically, it's very interesting. Like when you really dig into these people's history, you kind of you can really figure out who's who and who did what. So no wonder they succeeded the way they did. But yeah, a lot of lost history, a lot of things that a lot of information people can. It's like right out in front of us, and you just got to take the time to look for it. And man, you learn something new every day. But same thing. But going back to Pokemon though, I wouldn't be surprised they did the same thing because with a bunch of the ideas that they have, Asians are always brought up like in the sense that why waste why waste potential like that? You might not. So you might have ran out of time now, and it didn't work the first time, but then they can turn it into something else later on because they have another idea for another time. And that's what's really cool about all the stuff that I've learned with Pokemon so far is like, you really see like all the time and effort they put into it. And then this is what we got in the end, If it wasn't due to, deadlines and all that, how much different the series would have been if they would have kept the original ideas that they did. How Gen 1 would have been much different. How Gen 2 would have been much different. And that's even before we even start talking about Pokemon Reforged. If you ever want to jump into the 1997 Space World demo that's been carefully redone and try to stay original. And they try to keep it as original as possible towards the original. But if that is true, you really can see like how Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, and Green, and then when Gold, Silver, and Crystal came out, like what a difference it made. How different the story was, or even makes me wonder the same thing with Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6, Gen 7, Gen 8, and well, even Gen 9 when that comes out. Just how many different ideas like they had, but like over time, what they really, what it's evolved into over time and what it became in the end. Because, as time went on, we really started to see just how significantly different the series was and just how many ideas they must have passed off just because, maybe they thought they had better ideas, and obviously programming takes time and, efficiency. So maybe you can only do so much in that sense, but it's still impressive what they've done so far. So, again, like I said, if I find any more information, I'll let you know. But again, I think that this is kind of interesting to think about, like some of the Pokemon that haven't been in the official Pokemon games, and they're referencing other stuff from like previous, like the game designers would know about this, but like maybe we wouldn't because we have never seen some of this stuff before. But it's actually interesting to think that Blastoise, even though it's related to Squirtle and Wartortle in the final versions, it may have actually been referencing its previous scrapped prototype version. Because again, like I said, going back to Beta Larvitar, for example, it wasn't in Gen 1, but it was in Gen 2. But then they kept the beta design for the substitute doll, so they reused it somehow. And then they gave Larvitar an actual Pokemon name. A pre-evolved Pokemon, then it would evolve into a Shield Pupitar, and then it would evolve into, finally evolve into Tyranitar that we'd all know and love it as, right? So, interesting to think about. So, yeah, again, subscribe if you're not already, and if I find anything else, I'll let you know. If anybody has any requests, let me know, because that's actually pretty interesting too. But this is like just kind of something that I noticed, and I thought maybe there might have been a connection somehow.